How is it expected that we forgive those who physically or emotionally hurt us?
Obviously, this is a very sensitive question. It's a legitimate question. It's not even a question, it's a protest, a justified protest. Somebody hurts me, and the Eibusha says I should forgive him, which basically means he's getting away with it. So of course, the beginning of this has to be the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, we live our lives on a behavioral level. Before you get to the emotions and the psychology, there's a behavioral level of life that we have to conform to. And there's an entire section in Shulchan Aruch and the laws of Yom Kippur that discuss this question of forgiveness. And I'm not going to go into all the halachas of forgiveness. You can take out a Shulchan Aruch and read what's written about how one is supposed to forgive somebody who apologizes on Yom Kippur and so on. And there are instances when you don't have to forgive. It's only in those cases where you're not forgiving them is because you feel that it will motivate a more meaningful tshuva on the part of the person who wronged you. But you're not supposed to hold a grudge. You're supposed to forgive. So the beginning of it is the Shulchan Aruch. So it's important for us to read the Shulchan Aruch and to know what's expected of us. Is everything written in Shulchan Aruch easy to fulfill? No. Especially when what the Shulchan Aruch is saying isn't about a behavior, it's about an emotion. Forgiving another human being is letting go of your gripe. You know, if a person's hurt and they forgive the other person, they're still hurt. So how could they forgive them? So the first thing to do is you have to learn the halachas of Bakashas Mechila and the Sinas Mechila, which is a din in Torah. Now, to say something a little bit strong, and I God forbid don't say this in an insensitive way, but it is nevertheless a serious part of Yiddishkeit. In fact, there are halachas, there are laws that govern yichus that radiate from this. There's one of those, the Gemara speaks about it, the Rambam brings it in Chassidus Rebbeinu, that the Gevonim, right, there were a group of people who were wronged in the worst way. Members of their families were killed, murdered. And as a consequence of that, they held a grudge against Shaul's family. They were killed by Shaul HaMelech. He was really in pursuit of David HaMelech. It's a whole story. And they wouldn't forgive. David HaMelech, King David, saw that because of their refusal to forgive, there was a magefa. There was a plague, an epidemic in Israel. People were dying. God Almighty was taking up the cause of these Gevonim. Because these people were wronged and they held a grudge and they wouldn't forgive, people were dying. So David HaMelech came to them and asked them to forgive, and they refused. And actually, you know what? Sure, we'll forgive. 8 for 8. Shaul killed 8 members of our community. Give us 8 of his descendants, and we're done. And David HaMelech tried to negotiate with them. And in other words, it was a real fact that Yidden were dying on a regular basis, on a daily basis, in a magefa, because the Gevonim wouldn't forgive. And David HaMelech finally made a lottery, gave them 8 members of Shaul's family that they hung, and the magefa, the plague stopped. True story. So you see the power of a grudge. Because they were upset, there was a consequence that the Jewish people were feeling. David HaMelech had to remove that grudge, and he gave them 8 lives. Now, of course, you're going to start going into the questions. How are you allowed to take an innocent person and give him away to sacrifice him with the whole community? Which is another conversation, and it's a very long, involved story, which is not for the moment. But after this story, it was determined that the Gevonim lack the midas of the Jewish people. Right? The Gemara says that there are 3 simonim by a Jew: Rachmanim, by Shonim, and Gemlei Chasadim. They're compassionate, and they're bashful, and they're kind. And it's understood that included in these 3 midas of Rachmanim, Bashanim, and Gemlei Chasadim is that they're meichel, they forgive. They don't hold on to grudges. Particularly in that case, the people were actually dying. So it was determined that they have midas ha'achzorias, they have a cruelty in their character, and they became also lovei b'kol. We're not allowed to intermarry with them. They're Jews, but a Jew is not allowed to marry them. Because it is seen as a deep scar on the spirit of a Jew if he cannot find within himself the power to be a Rachman and a Baishan and a Gemel Chesed, compassionate and humble and bashful and kind, which means also to forgive. Now this is very strong. In other words, you who are asking this question are not asking this question philosophically. You have been wronged, and I can hear it in your tone. And I'm not, God forbid, being insensitive to the pain. But it is Jewish to let go. It is Jewish to forgive. Now, there is no doubt, to answer your question directly, that when you're forgiving another person, you're not just giving lip service, saying something. You have to mean it. You have to let go. And it's oftentimes very, very difficult to do, especially if the effects of the hurt that other person brought to you linger. They continue to exist. This is Torah's expectation of us, to forgive anyway. And if Torah says that we must forgive, that means we have the power to forgive. Let me give you an example in a different area, which I think is a great example because so many people relate to it. The halachas of kibbud av va'em are not at all conditional on what kind of parents you have. One of the 10 commandments, honor your father and your mother, does not have an asterisk that says, honor your father and your mother if they're normal people, if they're reasonable people. Honor your father and your mother, period. Your father and your mother could be the most abusive people in the world. They could have done the worst things to you. Now, you're not allowed to let them hurt you. In other words, you're not allowed to say, because I honor my father and my mother, I have to let my parents bring further damage to my psyche. But honoring father and mother are unconditional. It's not easy. It's almost, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan said that he thanks God he never knew his parents because he'd never be able to meet Torah's expectation of honoring your father and your mother. You have a story in the Gemara about a rabbi whose parents were so abusive that he left money for others to care for his parents and left because he said, I can't do it. So there are things in Torah which are difficult or near impossible to do. And if kibbud av va'em is difficult, right? If you have bad parents, some people are bad, and the people are bad also have children, and the children suffered, and Torah gives them an unconditional requirement to honor the father and the mother. This is how Yiddishkeit works. Some things are very difficult, and we have to do our best to do them. And if we succeed at honoring our parents, even if they don't deserve our honor, who are we benefiting? We're benefiting ourselves. We're benefiting ourselves because we're doing what the Eibishter wants. And of course, there's also the psychological benefit of not allowing them to hold on to us in the negative way that they raised us or didn't raise us. And Mechila is the same thing. The Eibishter gave us an obligation for Mechila, or to say it in a different way. We believe in Hashgacha Pratis. Somebody else hurt me. They're a conduit for God. God brought this to me, not that other person. The classic story, Takav David HaMelech himself, that this guy, Shimi ben Gera, threw stones at King David. He was a king. Threw stones and cursed him like you wouldn't curse the worst person. And David HaMelech forgave him. And the explanation for forgiving him is a biblical passage, Ki Hashem Amalek Aleh, God told him to curse. And Alter Rebbe has a whole essay in Tanya, essay 25, where he explores this. And he says, this is Hashgacha Pratis. That fellow, the person who wronged you, is going to have to give a reckoning to his creator because he made a bad choice. But as it relates to me, this is what the Eibishter wanted. The Eibishter gives each one of us tests. And the tests are the hardships in our lives. These tests are compounded when we blame it on another person, because you can't let go of that. But the hardship that other person brought to me is really a hardship that God brought to me. Now, being angry at God is also popular. But the point is, our lives are supposed to be lived to meet the challenges that Hashem gave us, not to be defeated by them. So there's no easy way to do this. Forgiving another human being means letting go of the anger, letting go of the grudge. Why? Not because that person deserves to be forgiven, because you were told to forgive. And when you forgive, you're accepting that this is the Eibishter's judgment, not that person's judgment, and you're accepting the Eibishter's judgment. And of course, it goes without saying, and you probably know this already, that any psychologist in the world will tell you that the healthiest things you can do for yourself is forgive and let go. You don't forgive that other person because you're trying to do that other person a favor. You forgive that other person because Hashem told you to forgive that other person. That's the religious component. And by forgiving that other person, you take away from that other person the control that they had over you. Anger is a terrible emotion. Hate is a terrible emotion. Holding a grudge is a terrible emotion. Legitimate, but terrible. And the psychological truth of it is that so long as you're upset with that person owns you. He holds you in the form of your anger. And if you let go of the anger, they no longer have any control over you. So forgiveness is a mitzvah. It's a part of Torah. It's a symptom of being a Jew that you're able to forgive. Not just that you say it, but you mean it. And it's not easy. Not easy at all. But when you're forgiving that other person, you're not forgiving the other person because they deserve to be forgiven. That's their business. You're forgiving the other person because the Eibusha told you to forgive that other person. And when you forgive that other person, you let go of that anger and that hatred and that grudge. And on a psychological level, you do yourself an enormous favor.